Hi, hello, my name is Gomez Joseph. I hope you've all been having a great day so far. If you are new, I welcome you. Today, I will be discussing the disturbing case of Joe Clark, which is a part of my Young Monsters miniseries. Like the title states, this case really is disturbing. When I was researching this case, it truly troubled me. Like, it truly gave me chills. It just made me just feel off. Like it just made my body feel off. Now, even though there is devastation in this case, I'm just thankful that it seems like justice was served. Now, I encourage you all to do your own research with this case and not just look at my video for all of the information. Here we go. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and start off by talking about someone named Chris Steiner. Now, Chris Steiner, he was born on November 19th of 1979 in Baraboo, Wisconsin. And sadly, I really don't know much about his personality. What I do know was that on July 4th of 1994, Chris was 14 at this point, and he was about to start a new job the following morning, and he was truly excited about it. When Chris's father went into his room to check up on him, to try to go ahead and wake him up to get ready for this new job, Chris's father found it odd that his son was nowhere in the room. Clearly, this is weird, so the parents called the cops, and the parents and the cops initially just thought that Chris snuck out of the home to attend some party to meet some girl. But when his parents saw that Chris was not coming home at the end of the day, they truly became concerned. As the police searched the house, they found that in the bedroom of Chris's brother, who wasn't actually there that night. Like, Chris's brother, was staying out for the night. But inside of that bedroom, the window was sliced open. Police also found muddy footprints in the house and saw that the patio doors were open. From what I gathered, I'm gonna assume that the police initially thought that Chris was the reason for all of these strange things happening in the house. Because from what I gathered, it seemed like the police also thought that Chris might have run away, but his parents were adamant that this wasn't the case at all. Especially since Chris was excited to start this new job, and Chris's parents knew that Chris had no problems at home. On July 10th of 1994, Chris's parents experienced the worst thing that any parent could face. A body was found in the Wisconsin River, and because the way that this body was found, it was just really bad, and it was only able to be identified with dental records. And sadly, it was confirmed that this body belonged to Chris Steiner, devastating his family. The police had no idea how Chris even ended up in this river, and pretty much ruled his death after the autopsy was done. The death was ruled as a drowning. And Chris's family, because the case would quickly become cold, his family would go another year without knowing exactly how Chris drowned. On July 29th of 1995, 12-year-old Thad Phillips would face the worst moments of his life. That night, he and his sister fell asleep on the couch. But when his father went to check in the living room, he saw his daughter on the couch. And this is like around 4 a.m. So he sees his daughter on the couch, but couldn't see Thad on the couch or find Thad anywhere else inside of the house. Of course, Thad's father is pretty much worried, like, your 12-year-old son is nowhere to be found. They are pretty new to the area, and the police were quickly notified. Though it seemed like there was no break-in, Thad's parents were absolutely certain that their son would never run away. What Thad's parents and police didn't know was that he was being carried out of the house while he was, sleepy. As for Thad, when he was being carried out of the house, he didn't, because, when he was first carried, he thought that it was his father, but soon realized it wasn't his father carrying him. Because the thing is that his father would usually go ahead and carry him whenever he was asleep and just carry him to bed. Now, again, like, Thad is pretty much, very, very, tired, and he doesn't really have the energy to really react because, normally if somebody is carrying us, a stranger especially, it gives you, the impression to go ahead and freak out. So Thad eventually realizes that this person who was carrying him was another boy in their neighborhood. And this boy would proceed to carry out 12-year-old Thad out of his house, carrying him into his. The boy who was carrying 12-year-old Thad was 17-year-old Joe Clark. And the thing about Joe is, like, while he, was bringing Thad into the house, he also invited Thad to a party. From what I gathered, it seems like Joe and Thad weren't really strangers like that. Like, while he was inviting Thad to this party, he was mentioning people who Thad knew from school. Now, Thad, I mean, of course, this is really a weird situation, but since Joe was mentioning people that he knew, because at first, the thing is that Thad kind of recognized Joe, and he just assumed that he was carrying Thad out of the house to help with, fixing his car or something. But sadly, Thad would soon find out that Joe was not asking for help with the car and that he was really not asking him to go to a party at all. What Thad would experience would be far much worse than he would have ever imagined. It definitely was not a party. What Thad realized was that Joe's house was dirty and nasty, and Joe was leading Thad upstairs. Once in Joe's bedroom, Thad did not expect for this older guy, to push him on the bed and break his ankle. Now, going further, what Joe did was just extremely, extremely excruciating and very disturbing, and I cannot bring myself to go ahead and give the details. Like, it would just go ahead and just make my body feel weird. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just be as less graphic as I can, because Thad really went through it. So of course, like, this guy, Joe, immediately breaks your ankle, and Thad truly realizes how crazy Joe was. Because he saw how crazy Joe was, Thad was attempting to escape, but this escape attempt only made Joe get angry, and he would continue to beat Thad. Again, I'm really not going to go ahead and go into details. What I can say is that Joe would continue to do disturbing, nasty, weird things in front of Thad. And he would continue to break this poor boy's bones and even try to suffocate him with pillows. I even read that he was trying to go ahead and jump on Thad's chest. As if nothing happened, Joe would carry Thad downstairs, wrap bandages around him, like made out of socks, and, just tend to his injuries. And in the living room, they would go ahead and watch TV as Joe would try to go ahead and have a conversation with Thad. Honestly, I really can't begin to imagine what Thad was going through. I can only kind of imagine what his mental state was, because not only do you kidnap this boy, you torture him by breaking his bones, you try to suffocate him, then all of a sudden you want to go ahead and chit-chat with him like Thad has any choice to be in your house. As I was gathering information, like, I was just thinking to myself, like, Joe is 17, like, where in the world are, like, his parents? Because for people who were growing up in the 80s and the 90s, like, please, please enlighten me, because, like, I would just go ahead and hear, like, different things. I'll be watching, like, old episodes on, TV and everything when it comes to the 80s and 90s about people who are, like, 15 years old, like, living by themselves. So, like, was Joe living by himself, or, like, were his parents, like, in and out of the house, like, not concerned about keeping the house neat and tidy? Because, responsible adults don't usually have, like, a nasty house, just pouring out of, their living space. It's just disgusting. Because, like, the condition of the house, like, it sounded like Joe was living there by himself. So, I mean, it's a possibility. Like, if you know, just go ahead and let me know in the comments, because I don't know. But because of Thad's confusion, he asked Joe why he was even torturing him. Joe does give an answer, but it is a very disturbing, creepy answer. The answer that Joe gave was that he liked the sound and the feeling of breaking bones. After hearing this, like, that is pretty much like asking Joe, like, why in the world does your crazy behind have to go ahead and break my bones? Like, why don't we just go ahead and break your own bones? Joe claimed that he attempted to before but failed. So little Jeffrey Dahmer here states that he had been, doing this before to another boy named Chris. Now, of course, now we know that Joe Clark was referencing Chris Steiner. So at this point, like, I really can't even bring myself to go ahead and call Joe anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and call him by his last name, Clark. So Dad asked Clark if he could call his parents. Clark would proceed to give Thad a phone, but it was disconnected, so I'm pretty sure, that Clark knew that. Seeing that he wasn't able to reach his parents, like, Thad would go on to plead and beg for his release. Unfortunately, Clark was not hearing it and proceeded to throw Thad into a closet. The surprising thing is that after throwing Thad into a closet and locking him, he would leave the house to go to a party with his girlfriend. After hearing how Clark has been acting, like, I don't know why some girl would want to be with Clark's crazy behind, but what's done is done. But by God's grace, throwing Thad into that closet and leaving him in the house alone was Clark's biggest mistake. What happens next is like something straight out of some thriller or horror movie or some sort of TV show, because Dad, like, he would go ahead and like scramble to see what he can use in the closet, and he finds this guitar, using the guitar to break down the closet door. Of course, with Dad's bones broken all over the place, like, he is just very weak, and the only way to go ahead and get down to the living room was to literally fall down the flight of stairs. By the grace of God, Dad is able to get a hold of a phone and calls 911, telling them that he had been snatched from his house and had been tortured for 43 hours. He explains where he is, he explains who has him, and the dispatcher was pretty much telling Dad, like, that they knew of Joe Clark because Clark had been in trouble with the police before. Praise God, the police did arrive and took, they saw Dad's injuries and immediately took him to the hospital. Due to his injuries, like, there was internal bleeding, and the doctors told Dad that if he was not rescued, it could have taken 2 hours for him to pass away. So really, like, Dad's escape is truly an example of divine intervention. Since the police knew exactly who they were looking for, crazy Joe Clark was arrested. What really disturbs me is that the first words that Clark said when he was getting arrested was, "Oh, he's still alive?" If I was a police officer, I would have told him, yes, he's barely alive because he had to be tortured by a psychopath like you. Searching through Clark's house after the arrest, they found a journal of his which listed 29 people that he was planning to go after. As they interrogate Clark, he pretty much makes this excuse by saying that he only intended to hang out with Dad. But my thing is, like, why in the world would you want to go ahead and why would in the world, as you, a 17-year-old, want to hang out with a 12-year-old boy that you barely know? He goes on to claim that he pretty much had no recollection of what he did to Dad and claims to have blacked out when Dad was receiving his injuries, which, of course, I'm not buying that, and I'm pretty sure that the police weren't buying anything that came out of his crazy mouth. So Clark receives all these charges, and a trial eventually takes place. But the thing about the trial is that after he's pretty much caught red-handed, he proceeds to go ahead and plead not guilty. He pleaded not guilty due to the excuse of mental illness. Now, I know that I've been calling him crazy throughout the video, but I'm sure that you and I would agree that there is a huge difference between mental illness and evil crazy. The defense will go ahead and make this claim that Clark's biological mom was a drug addict before giving him up for adoption, which meant that his mom was a drug addict while she was pregnant with him, which caused all these, quote unquote mental disorders inside of him. Here's my thing about it. I'm pretty sure that there are plenty of people who had drug addicted mothers who were pregnant with them, but they did not grow up to become creepy, crazy people who would hurt other people. Thank God the jury was not buying this and found Clark guilty, which would make him get sentenced to 100 years for what he did to Thad and 60 years for what he did to Chris Steiner, which means that Clark ain't getting out of prison anytime soon. What really trips me is that this boy would try to go ahead and make an appeal a year later, but thankfully that did not work because they need to go ahead and keep his crazy behind in jail. Now, Thad, by God's grace, he was able to eventually fully recover and actually was able to receive $21 million in damages. Now, $21 million, like, that is a lot of money, that can handle a few bills and everything, but I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure he appreciated the reward because, that's a really hefty reward. But I am 100% certain that he would have wanted to be free of the physical and emotional trauma which Clark caused him. As for Chris's family, even though they did get justice for him, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't stop them from being broken over the fact that Chris is no longer with them. It has been almost 30 years since Chris lost his life due to someone who had his own issues. Now, that's the thing about the defense, because of course, they didn't know Clark before the trial began, but clearly, because I mentioned, Clark had trouble with the law, so it just makes me think that clearly this boy obviously, had problems previously to what he did to Chris and Thad. I really couldn't find out much about Clark's upbringing other than the fact that he was adopted, but you mean to tell me that no one noticed that this boy needed help? Because how is it that no one seemed to notice any signs? Unless he actually hid them well, but because either nobody noticed the signs or nobody did really anything about finding these signs, because people failed at doing something about the signs that Clark was probably giving, a boy lost his life, and another boy's life was never the same again. Yes, justice was served, but I'm certain that all of this devastation truly could have been prevented. I thank you all for taking the time in your day to watch this video. If you did like this video, please feel free to hit the like button. If you have any thoughts on this case at all, please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you'd like to see more videos from me, please feel free to subscribe and click the bell to be notified about the next video. If there is a certain true crime case that you'd like me to cover, go ahead and let me know. And I will see y'all for next True Crime Tuesdays, and I will talk to y'all later.